participation without power. It's a paradox South Africa cannot afford. Prof. Luke Sinwell's The Participation Paradox shows how corruption, protests and political divides reveal the gap between speaking and also being heard, and what must happen to close it. So he's going to be joining us this morning following news of corruption, service delivery protests, political dynamics that are obviously unfolding in South Africa's democracy. So let's explore this further. A very good morning, Prof, and thank you for your time at this hour.
Good morning to you too. Thank you for having me on the show.
Prof. Luke, the notion of illusion of inclusion that strongly emerges through your work, the paradox of participation. And I wonder if you could explore that further. Would you say that this is what is driving the protests that we're currently seeing erupting townships, informal settlements currently? Perhaps you can impact from your vantage point for us.
Well, I don't think it's for residents who are engaging in protests so far. I don't think anymore for them that they have an illusion of inclusion because they can see clearly, for example, in the different protests in Soweto and Tembisa, and now recently the protests in Westbury around water. They can see clearly that they're being ignored over a long period of time. Often, in the case of Westbury, just as one example, it has been 10 years that they've been having a problem of water, and then they didn't have access for 5 days. They tried to engage local government councillors, different forums. They had peaceful demonstrations. And then they decided that the only way that they're going to be heard, this is what they said, the only way they're going to be heard is if they occupy the streets in protest and blockade. But I would say that the real illusion of inclusion was in fact in 1994 and in 1996 when people had or gained political power and a seemingly progressive constitution, but that did not translate into social and economic emancipation.
Okay, so let's expand on that further because, I mean, you argue that participation can be a double-edged sword. It's a way to include, but it's also a way to control. And so talk to us about the protests then, who now, they actually they are a form of participation, but it's no change is happening, right? So all of this is seemed disheartening at this point. So what's really unfolding then on that front?
Well, it is a way for people's voices to be able to be heard and to challenge top-down approaches to development whereby ordinary people have no voice whatsoever in determining, water policies or electricity policies. But in fact, it does have some kind of an impact because you can see, we keep calling it the smoke that calls when people are occupying streets, preventing business as usual. We saw it in the Fees Must Fall campaign as well, where people rose up to reclaim their universities, to decolonize education, and to prevent fees from rising above the rate of inflation, and that actually worked. And these protests, as much as they can be co-opted after they happen so that the underlying policies that actually cause the protests, which are cost recovery, privatization, and a failure of local government to provide basic services in a sustainable way on a regular basis. So it does affect those things from happening. It does make those actually happen, but the problem is that if we get the problem solved in one community, they do have access to water. Can there be an overarching policy or underlying policy whereby communities all have access to safe, clean, affordable energy and water?
And Prof, even if we look at beyond service delivery issues and the protests that are happening, just the overall political landscape as well. I mean, a story that comes to the fore is the SACP, the Communist Party, their decision to, run independently. And I wonder then, in lieu of what's happening with the participation paradox, how would you weigh in? Because now there's all raising questions about if this is the breakaway solution to improve South Africa, what would it take for them to be a credible party as well? How do they then begin to rethink their participation in all of this?
Well, the South African Communist Party still has a critical relationship to the ANC, even if they, and the Tripartite Alliance, even if they are standing independently in the elections. And I think what they're doing holds some positive possibilities in terms of the Red Caravan approach that they're doing to engage local communities, to develop self-reliance, to build up and renovate clinics. But much more, in order for the SACP for its electoral politics and independence, for it to build the kind of alternative anti-capitalist politics that it wants to do, it has to partner with grassroots organizations to hold government and big business interests accountable. So it can't just come in and say we're going to build and do a few things to improve the lives of people in these few areas. It actually has to have an approach whereby it enables grassroots organizations that are protesting to build their own power to hold government. And even if that community, specific communities will elect the SACP in their municipality, those communities cannot just be passive and assuming that the SACP will then deliver. The capacity of those organizations must be built so that they can sustain themselves and connect to other communities in Tembisa, Soweto, Khayelitsha, and Westbury.
Yeah, because, Prof. Luke, there is the question of whether they can align enough to the grassroots movements or they're too far embedded in the state. And so it's going to be interesting to monitor that. And just ideologically, because the EFF already captured so much of the radical space, how could the SACP then distinguish itself ideologically and practically from the EFF? What are you observing on that front? Even if we're looking at reimagining what participation means, talk to us about, what comes through. What are those suggestions that you have put forth as we end off on that twofold question?
Well, the EFF has occupied a lot of the anti-capitalist rhetoric and discourse, but has been less effective at engaging ordinary residents at the forefront of service delivery and workers' protests. So they launched their campaign. The EFF launched its own campaign in 2013 on the backs of a mine workers' strike. But it wasn't able, this tells us about the EFF, it wasn't able to continually engage in a struggle for a living wage or effectively engage in a struggle for a living wage. It wasn't able, in fact, to get the people in Nkaneng, Wonderkop, and Marikana access to electricity. So it hasn't, embedded itself in those working class communities to the extent that it's able to fight with them in larger stages of power. But the SACP holds that possibility, although it doesn't look through its it kind of has soft campaigns to deliver a few things here and here, but it doesn't look like it's supporting grassroots struggles for land, housing, electricity, and water in a way that can be sustained, beyond the elections.
Okay, so Prof, thank you. We've run out of time. I know the conversation continues because it's about also reimagining what this participation looks like. And without transformation, it is a paradox. So thank you for your time at this hour. Let's leave it there. Thank you to Prof. Luke Sinwell for weighing in, sociology professor at UJ.